They say money can't buy happiness, but in New York City it can buy silence, immunity, and the power to crush anyone who stands in your way. At least, that's what Julian Thorpe and his billionaire friends believed. They thought the world was their playground, and people were just toys to be broken. But on a rainy Tuesday night inside the city's most exclusive club, they made a fatal miscalculation. They forgot that while money talks, power whispers. And sometimes, the man you should fear most isn't the one shouting. It's the one standing silently, directly behind you. The rain battered against the blacked-out windows of l'Orologio, the most exclusive supper club in Manhattan's meatpacking district. Inside, the air smelled of aged leather, Cuban tobacco, and the distinct metallic scent of money. It was the kind of place where the menu had no prices, the lighting was designed to flatter plastic surgery, and the waitstaff were treated like invisible furniture. Eleanor Rossi adjusted her apron, wincing as a sharp pain shot up her calf. She had been on her feet for 10 hours straight. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe bun, highlighting the exhaustion in her emerald eyes. She was 24, studying law by day, and serving men who earned more in a minute than she did in a decade by night. She needed this job. The tips at l'Orologio covered her tuition and her mother's medical bills at Mount Sinai Hospital. Elena, the floor manager, a nervous little man named Gilbert, hissed as he passed her. Table 4, the VIPs. Don't mess this up. That's the Vane brothers and the Sterling heir. If they ask for the moon, you give them the sky. Elena took a deep breath, smoothed her black dress, and picked up the tray. She knew who they were. Everyone knew who they were. Seated at the best booth in the house, surrounded by velvet ropes, were 4 men who represented the worst kind of American royalty. First was Julian Thorpe, the 30-year-old CEO of Apex Dynamics. He was handsome in a predatory way, wearing a bespoke navy Brioni suit that cost more than Elena's entire education. He was currently swirling a glass of amber liquid, looking bored. Next to him was Marcus Vane, the heir to a shipping empire that dated back to the Industrial Revolution. Marcus was cruel, loud, and known for throwing tantrums that ended in lawsuits he always settled out of court. Across from them sat Liam Holt, a hedge fund manager with a smile that never reached his eyes, and Braden Calloway, the son of a senator, who was currently tapping ashes from his cigar onto the pristine white tablecloth, missing the crystal ashtray on purpose. "Gentlemen," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Is everything to your liking?" Marcus Vane looked up, his eyes scanning her body, before landing on her face with a look of disappointment. "The service is slow," he drawled, his voice thick with unearned arrogance. "We ordered the Chateau Margaux, 2009, 20 minutes ago." "I apologize, sir," Elena said, placing the bottle on the table with practiced grace. The sommelier was decanting it to ensure it breathes properly. "I don't pay for air, sweetheart," Julian Thorpe interjected, not even looking at her. He snapped his fingers. "Pour, and try not to spill it. This suit is worth more than your life." Elena uncorked the bottle. Her hands were steady, a trait she had inherited from her father, a man she hadn't seen in 15 years. She poured the deep red wine into the crystal goblets, measuring the amount perfectly. "Finally," Braden sneered, picking up his glass. He took a sip, swished it around his mouth, and then, without warning, spat it back into the glass with a loud, grotesque noise. The restaurant went silent. Nearby tables, filled with models and politicians, turned to look. "Vinegar," Braden announced loudly. "This tastes like absolute swill." "Sir," Eleanor said, her pulse quickening, "that is a $3,000 bottle. It was opened in front of you. Are you calling me a liar?" Braden stood up, towering over her. He was drunk, his face flushed. "I said it tastes like garbage. Take it away, and bring us the Romanée Conti, the 95. Elena froze. The Romanée Conti cost $25,000 a bottle. "I will have to get the manager's approval for that exchange, sir." Julian Thorpe laughed, a cold, dry sound. "Manager? Do you know who we are? I could buy this building and turn it into a parking lot for my collection of Ferraris by tomorrow morning. Just get the wine." Elena looked at Gilbert, who was cowering near the kitchen doors. He gave her a frantic nod. "Just do it." She swallowed her pride. "Right away, sir." For the next 2 hours, the 4 men were a nightmare. They ordered 4 bottles of the Romanée Conti. They ordered the Wagyu beef and sent it back twice, claiming it was overcooked when it was perfectly rare. They threw napkins on the floor, just to watch Elena pick them up. They made lewd comments about her figure, speaking about her as if she were a horse at an auction. Elena took it. She took it because she had rent due. She took it because her mother needed dialysis. She took it because she was a professional. Finally, at 1:00 a.m., the carnage ended. The table was a wreck of spilled wine, half-eaten lobster, and cigar ash. Elena printed the bill. She placed it on a silver tray and approached the table. "Gentlemen," she said softly. The bill total was $112,450. Julian Thorpe picked up the black leather folder. He opened it, looked at the number, and then looked at Elena. A smirk curled the corner of his lip. He closed the folder and tossed it onto the wet table. "No," Julian said. Elena blinked. "Excuse me, sir." "No," Marcus Vane chimed in, leaning back and putting his feet up on the booth. "We aren't paying that." "Was there an issue with the service, sir?" Elena asked, her blood running cold. "I can get the manager." "The issue," Liam Holt said, swirling his brandy, "is that we didn't enjoy the atmosphere. The waitress, she was depressing, brought down the whole vibe. Why should we pay for a bad time?" "Plus," Braden laughed, "it's a game we play. It's called the walkout. We bet 50 grand on who could make the waitress cry first. You haven't cried yet, sweetheart. So technically, the game isn't over." "Sir, this bill is over $100,000, Elena said, her voice hardening. "If you don't settle it, it comes out of my pay. I will be fired. I will be blacklisted." "Sounds like a you problem," Julian said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "Now, run along. We're done here." Elena stood rooted to the spot. The humiliation was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. But beneath the humiliation, something else was rising. Anger. A fiery, dangerous anger she hadn't felt in a long time. "I cannot let you leave without paying," Elena said loudly. The ambient music in the club seemed to dip. The atmosphere shifted. People were watching now. Marcus Vane stood up, buttoning his jacket. He stepped close to Elena, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive scotch and entitlement. "Move," he whispered, "or I'll have you arrested for harassment. Do you know who my father is? One phone call and you'll be in a cell in Rikers before the sun comes up." "I don't care who your father is," Elena said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "You ate the food. You drank the wine. You pay." Braden laughed, a harsh barking sound. "She's got claws. Look at that, Julian. The little stray cat thinks she's a tiger." Julian stood up slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single $1 bill. He crumpled it into a ball and flicked it at Elena. It hit her chest and fell to the floor. "There," Julian said. "For your trouble. That's about what your dignity is worth, right?" Tears pricked Elena's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give them the satisfaction of winning their sick bet. "Gilbert," Marcus shouted toward the kitchen, "get this trash out of our way before I buy this place and fire you all." Gilbert rushed over, sweating profusely. "Elena, please," he begged, grabbing her arm. "Just move. Let them go. We'll figure it out." "No, Gilbert," Elena ripped her arm away. "They owe the restaurant $100,000. You're going to let them walk out?" "Mr. Vane, Mr. Thorpe," Gilbert stammered. "Perhaps we can work out a discount." "No discount," Liam said. "We're leaving. And if she touches us, we press charges for assault." The four men began to push past her. They were laughing, high-fiving each other. They had won. They always won. The world was built for them. Elena felt a tear finally escape, tracking hot down her cheek. She felt small. She felt powerless. "Hey!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You are thieves! Just rich, pathetic thieves!" Julian stopped. He turned around, slowly. The amusement was gone from his face, replaced by a cold, dead stare. He walked back to Elena until he was inches from her face. "Say that again," he hissed, "and I'll make sure you never work in this city again. I'll make sure your mother gets kicked out of that hospital bed you're paying for. Oh yes, we did a background check on the staff before we booked. We know about the sick mother. We know everything." Elena gasped. The cruelty was breathtaking. "Now," Julian smiled, seeing the fear in her eyes. "Get on your knees and apologize. If you do it nicely, maybe I'll pay half the bill." "Do it!" Marcus jeered. "Beg!" The club was dead silent. Every eye was on them. It was a spectacle of cruelty. Elena's knees shook. She thought of her mother. She thought of the medical bills. Slowly, painfully, she began to lower herself. "That's it," Braden laughed. "Good girl." But just as Elena's knee was about to touch the cold marble floor, a strange sound cut through the room. Click. It was the distinct sound of a heavy brass lock being turned on the main entrance doors. Then the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The air grew heavy, charged with static electricity. The shadows in the back of the club seemed to lengthen. Julian Thorpe stopped smiling. He looked confused. Why did the music stop? It was true. The jazz band had stopped playing mid-note. The drummer was staring at something behind the four rich men. The bartender had put down his shaker and backed away against the wall, his face pale as a sheet. Gilbert, the manager, was no longer looking at the Vane brothers. He was looking past them, his eyes wide with absolute terror. He began to shake, visibly. "What is going on?" Marcus demanded, turning to look at the staff. "Why is everyone looking at us?" "They aren't looking at you," a voice said. It wasn't a loud voice. It was a baritone rumble, smooth like velvet over gravel, yet it carried across the large room with terrifying clarity. It was the voice of a man who never had to repeat himself. Elena froze. She knew that voice. It was a ghost from a lifetime ago, a voice she hadn't heard since she was 9 years old, playing in the streets of Little Italy. She looked up. Standing directly behind Julian Thorpe, emerging from the shadows of the private VIP corridor that no one was allowed to enter, was a man. He was tall, over 6'4", dwarfing the 4 men in front of him. He wore a black suit, but unlike Julian's flashy Brioni, this suit had no labels. It was cut to fit a warrior, not a businessman. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a glimpse of a tattoo on his neck, a black dagger intertwined with a rose. His hair was dark, swept back, and his face was a masterpiece of sharp angles and brutal scars. A thin white line ran through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanent look of dangerous skepticism. But it was his eyes that stopped the hearts of everyone in the room. They were grey. Not the grey of a storm cloud, but the grey of steel. Cold, unyielding, dead. It was Dante Moretti, the capo dei capi, the boss of bosses. The man who didn't just run New York. He was New York. He stood motionless, his hands in his pockets, staring at the back of Julian Thorpe's head. 2 massive bodyguards, looking like mountains in suits, stood silently by the locked doors, blocking the exit. "Who said that?" Julian spun around, annoyed. "Who the hell are—" The words died in his throat. Julian Thorpe was 6 feet tall. He was a powerful man in the corporate world. But as he turned and found himself looking up into the dead grey eyes of Dante Moretti, he shrank. Instinctively, primal fear took over. Dante didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He just looked down at Julian with the kind of indifference a lion shows a rat. "You have a debt to settle," Dante said. His voice was so quiet, yet everyone heard it. "Do you know who I am?" Julian tried to bluster, though his voice cracked. "I am Julian Thorpe. Dante moved. It was a blur of motion too fast to track. His hand shot out and clamped around Julian's throat. He didn't squeeze. He just held him there, immobilized. Dante leaned in close, his face inches from the billionaire's terrified eyes. "I don't care who you are," Dante whispered, "but you should really know who she is." Dante's eyes shifted, locking on to Elena. For a split second, the ice in his gaze melted, replaced by something agonizingly human, regret, longing, and fierce protectiveness. "Hello, tesoro," Dante said to her. The silence in l'orologio was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a gunshot, a vacuum where the world holds its breath to see who is still standing. Dante Moretti's hand was still wrapped around Julian Thorpe's throat. It wasn't a chokehold of panic. It was a grip of ownership. Julian, a man who bench-pressed 300 pounds and boxed at an executive gym every Thursday, was frozen. His survival instincts had overridden his ego, screaming at him that the predator standing behind him was not of the same species. Elena stared at Dante. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The last time she had seen him, he was 19, standing in the rain outside her father's bakery, wearing an oversized coat and promising her he'd come back for her. She was 9 then. He was just the baker's son who got into too many fights. Now he was a myth, a monster, a king. "Dante," she whispered, the name slipping out before she could stop it. Dante's eyes, those chips of frozen steel, didn't waver from Julian's face, but his jaw tightened. He heard her. "Let him go," Marcus Vane said, though his voice lacked its usual boom. It was thin, reedy. He stood up, trying to muster the authority of the Vane shipping empire. "Do you know who we are?" This is assault. I'm calling the police commissioner. He's a personal friend of my father." Dante finally moved. He released Julian, not with a shove, but by simply opening his hand and stepping back, as if Julian were something sticky he wanted to wipe off. Julian gasped, clutching his throat, coughing violently. Dante turned his head slowly toward Marcus. He didn't turn his body, just his head. It was a reptilian movement. "The commissioner," Dante repeated. His voice was low, a smooth baritone that vibrated in the floorboards. "Commissioner Holloway. Yes, he enjoys the cigars I send him. He also enjoys the fact that I don't release the photos of him on his boat with the women who aren't his wife." Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. His face went ashen. "Sit down," Dante said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command spoken at conversational volume. But the weight behind it was crushing. Marcus Vane, who had never obeyed an order in his life, sat down so hard the booth shook. Dante turned back to Julian, who was trying to regain his composure, straightening his tie with trembling hands. "You," Dante said, gesturing to the spilled wine and the mess on the table. "You seem to have forgotten the basic rules of commerce. You consume. You pay." "We were going to pay," Liam Holt lied, his eyes darting to the locked doors where the two massive bodyguards stood like statues. "It was a joke, just a misunderstanding. Right, boys?" "A joke," Dante mused. He walked slowly around the table. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate. Thud, thud, thud. He stopped behind Elena. She could feel the heat radiating from him. He smelled of sandalwood, gunpowder, and rain. He didn't touch her, but his presence wrapped around her like a heavy coat. "Tell me," Dante said, looking at the four men, but speaking to Elena. "Did you find it funny, Elena?" Elena looked at the floor. "No." "Look at them," Dante commanded softly. "Lift your head, Tesoro. Look them in the eye." Elena forced her chin up. She looked at Julian, whose arrogance had dissolved into sweat. She looked at Braden, who was trying to light a cigarette, but couldn't get his lighter to spark because his thumb was shaking. "Did they laugh?" Dante asked. "Yes," Elena said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "They laughed when they poured the wine on the floor. They laughed when they called me trash." Dante made a low sound in his throat. It was a growl. He reached out and picked up the bottle of Romanée Conti that sat on the table. It was nearly full. $25,000, Dante murmured, inspecting the label. "A fine vintage. And you spat it out." It was corked," Braden stammered. Dante looked at Braden. "Open your mouth." "What?" Braden blinked. "Open your mouth." Braden hesitated. Dante didn't move fast this time. He just leaned forward, his eyes darkening. "If I have to open it for you, Braden, you won't have a jaw left to close." Braden opened his mouth. Dante tilted the bottle. He didn't pour a glass. He poured the wine directly onto the table, splashing it over Braden's expensive Italian loafers, over his suit pants, and finally, he flicked the bottle so a wave of dark red liquid splashed across Braden's face and white dress shirt. Braden spluttered, gasping, wiping the wine from his eyes. It looked like blood soaking into the white cotton. "Does that taste corked to you?" Dante asked calmly, setting the bottle down with a gentle clink. You maniac," Julian shouted, finding a shred of courage. "You're going to pay for this. We are the pillars of this city. You are nothing, Dante cut him off. He stepped closer. Invading their space, looming over the booth. You think because you inherited money, you have power. You think because you can buy a building, you own the ground it stands on. Dante leaned down, placing both hands on the table, leaning into their faces. I am the ground, Dante whispered. I am the concrete you walk on. I am the steel in the walls. I own the unions that built your offices. I own the trucks that ship your goods, Marcus. I own the debt your father is trying to hide from the SEC, Liam. And you? He looked at Julian. I own the silence that keeps your little secrets buried. The four men were paralyzed. This wasn't just a gangster. This was a man who had done his homework. This was a man who held the strings of the city, and they had just tripped over one of them. Now, Dante stood up straight, brushing invisible dust from his suit. The bill. I'll pay it, Julian said quickly, reaching for his wallet. Here. I have an Amex black card. Charge it double. Just let us leave. He held out the black metal card. Dante looked at the card. He looked at Elena. Elena, Dante said. Take the card. Elena hesitated, then reached out. Her fingers brushed Julian's. He flinched as if she were made of fire. She took the card. Go run it, Dante said. Add a 100% tip for the entertainment. Elena nodded and walked toward the POS terminal near the waiter station. The room watched her. She felt like she was walking in a dream. She swiped the card. It was approved immediately. She printed the receipt and walked back. It's paid, Elena said softly. Good, Julian exhaled, standing up. Now we're leaving. Sit, Dante barked. Julian froze halfway up. We paid. You said... I said the bill is paid, Dante corrected him. That covers the food and the wine. That settles the debt with the restaurant. Dante walked over to Elena. He reached out, and with a touch so gentle it made her shiver, he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, calloused, a stark contrast to the soft skin of her neck. But you haven't paid the debt to her, Dante said. You insulted her. You made her kneel. You tried to buy her dignity with $1. Dante turned back to the men, his eyes void of mercy. Money is easy for you. Writing a check hurts none of you, Dante said. So the price has changed. Now we deal in a currency you aren't used to spending. What do you want? Marcus whispered, terrified. Humility, Dante said. The atmosphere in the club had shifted from electric tension to a heavy, suffocating dread. The patrons at the other tables were pretending not on to look, but everyone was listening. No one dared to leave. To leave would be to draw attention, and attention from Dante Moretti was a death sentence. Dante snapped his fingers. One of the massive bodyguards by the door walked over. He was carrying a bucket. A dirty, grey, industrial mop bucket, filled with soapy water that smelled of harsh bleach. He placed it directly next to the table of the 4 billionaires. Then he dropped 4 rags onto the wet, wine-stained table. Splat, 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 splat. The wet rags landed in front of each man. What is this? Liam Holt asked, looking at the rag with revulsion. You made a mess, Dante said simply. Clean it up. You must be joking, Julian scoffed, a nervous laugh escaping him. We don't clean. We have people for that. I'll pay your janitor $1,000 to... Dante moved so fast that Elena didn't even see the strike. She only heard the sound, a sickening crack of flesh meeting wood. Dante had grabbed Julian by the back of the neck and slammed his face into the table. He held him there, Julian's cheek pressed into the spilled Romanée Conti and half-eaten lobster shells. "Julian!" Braden screamed, jumping up. The bodyguard stepped forward, placing a massive hand on Braden's chest and shoving him back into his seat with effortless force. Dante leaned down to Julian's ear. Julian was whimpering, his expensive suit soaking up the wine. "I told you," Dante whispered. "I don't want your money. I want your labor. You treated her like a servant. Tonight, you serve." Dante pulled Julian up. Julian's nose was bleeding, blood mixing with the wine on his face. He looked broken, his eyes wide with shock. "Pick up the rag," Dante ordered. Trembling, Julian picked up the wet, grey cloth. "The floor," Dante pointed. "Where you threw the napkins, where you spilled the wine. Every drop. If I see a spot, you start over." Julian Thorpe, the CEO of Apex Dynamics, a man who had fired 300 people via Zoom call the week before, slid out of the booth. He got down on his knees. His $3,000 suit pants touched the dirty restaurant floor. He began to wipe. The room was deathly silent. The only sound was the wet swish-swish of the rag and Julian's jagged breathing. "The rest of you," Dante said, looking at the other three. "Join him." Marcus, Liam, and Braden looked at each other. They looked at Julian, broken and bleeding on the floor. They looked at the bodyguards. Slowly, painfully, they slid out of the booth. It was a grotesque tableau. 4 of the most powerful young men in New York City, on their hands and knees, scrubbing the floor of a supper club, while a waitress and a Mafia don watched. Elena felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't joy. She wasn't cruel. But it was a profound sense of balance. The scales of the universe, usually so tipped against people like her, were finally righting themselves. She looked at Dante. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating. He was watching them with a detached, clinical expression. He was teaching a lesson, not for his own amusement, but because it was necessary. "Mr. Spot," Dante said, pointing with his shoe near Marcus's hand. Marcus scrubbed harder, sweat dripping from his forehead. Is this enough?" he panted. "The floor is clean." Dante looked at the floor. It was indeed spotless. The wine was gone. The debris was gone. "The floor is clean," Dante agreed, "but the apology is still missing." The 4 men stopped scrubbing. They remained on their knees, looking up at Elena. "Stand up," Dante said. They stood up. They were ruined. Their suits were stained at the knees, their shirts splattered, their faces slick with sweat and fear. They looked like naughty schoolboys who had been dragged through a sewer. "Apologize to Miss Rossi," Dante said, "and make me believe it." Julian wiped the blood from his nose with his sleeve. He looked at Elena. For the first time all night, he actually saw her. He didn't see a uniform. He saw the woman who had the protection of the devil himself. "I'm sorry," Julian rasped. I was out of line. It won't happen again." "Miss Rossi," Marcus mumbled, looking at his feet. "I apologize for my behavior." "Same here," Liam said. "Sorry," Braden whispered. Dante looked at Elena. "Do you accept?" Elena took a deep breath. She looked at these men, stripped of their armor. "I accept your apology," she said, her voice clear. "Now please leave." "Get out," Dante said, his voice dropping back to that dangerous rumble. And if I ever hear that you've come back here, if I ever hear that you've spoken her name, if you even walk on the same side of the street as this restaurant—" He didn't finish the threat. He didn't have to. "We understand," Julian said. The 4 men scrambled toward the door. The bodyguard stepped aside, unlocking the brass lock. The rich men spilled out into the rainy night, stumbling, running, desperate to escape the gravity of the man inside. The door clicked shut. The spell broke. The restaurant began to breathe again. The jazz band hesitantly started playing a slow, mournful tune. The other diners returned to their whispers, though their eyes kept darting toward the center of the room. Dante turned to Gilbert, the manager. "Gilbert," Dante said. "Yes, Mr. Moretti," Gilbert squeaked. "Elena is done for the night. In fact, she is done working here completely." "What?" Elena gasped. "Dante, no, I need this job. The tuition. My mom—" Dante turned to her. The hardness in his face vanished completely. The grey eyes softened, swirling with an emotion that looked painfully like love. "You don't need this job, Elena," he said softly. "You never did. I just didn't know where you were until tonight." I don't understand," Elena stammered. She felt lightheaded. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaky. "Come with me," Dante said, extending his hand. It was an invitation, not a command. "Let's get you out of here." Elena looked at his hand. It was large, scarred, capable of terrible violence, yet it was held open to her with infinite gentleness. She looked at the apron she was wearing, the symbol of her servitude. She looked at the restaurant that had been her prison for 2 years. She untied the apron and let it drop to the floor. She reached out and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. "Where are we going?" she asked. Dante pulled her gently toward the private exit, the one he had entered through. "To settle the past," Dante said, "and to talk about why you never answered my letters." Elena frowned. "Letters? Dante, I never got any letters." Dante stopped walking. He looked down at her, his brows knitting together. A shadow passed over his face, not anger at her, but a dark realization of betrayal by someone else. "You never got them?" he asked, his voice dangerous again. "No. Never." Dante's jaw clenched. "Then we have even more to discuss than I thought." He led her out into the cool, dark corridor, away from the prying eyes, into the world that belonged to him. The service corridor of l'Orologio was a stark contrast to the velvet-draped dining room. It was cold concrete, smelling of damp cardboard and dish soap. But for Elena, walking next to Dante Moretti, it felt like the most significant walk of her life. He didn't touch her as they walked, but he shielded her. His body was constantly angled to block any potential threat, though the only things in the hallway were frightened busboys pressing themselves against the walls to let the King of New York pass. They emerged into the alleyway. The rain was coming down harder now, a relentless New York downpour that turned the cobblestones of the meatpacking district into slick black mirrors. Waiting at the curb was not a normal car. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, extended wheelbase, painted a black so deep it seemed to absorb the streetlights. A driver, a stocky man with a scar running through his hairline, stood by the open rear door, holding a massive umbrella. "Enzo," Dante nodded to the driver. "Capo," Enzo replied, his eyes briefly flicking to Elena with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He held the umbrella over her, ensuring not a single drop touched her blonde hair. "Get in," Dante said softly. Elena slid onto the cream leather seats. The interior was silent, hermetically sealed from the noise of the city. It smelled of rich mahogany and Dante's cologne, that intoxicating mix of sandalwood and danger. Dante slid in beside her, filling the space with his overwhelming presence. The heavy door thudded shut, sealing them in a private world. "Drive," Dante said. "Home." "The penthouse, sir?" Enzo asked from the front, his eyes visible in the rear-view mirror. "Yes." The car glided forward. It didn't feel like driving. It felt like floating. Elena looked down at her hands. They were trembling. The adrenaline of the confrontation with the Vane brothers was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and a confusing swirl of emotions regarding the man sitting next to her. "You're shaking," Dante observed. He reached into a hidden compartment in the center console and pulled out a crystal decanter and a glass. He poured a small amount of amber liquid. "Drink," he said, handing it to her. "It's cognac. It will settle your nerves." Elena took the glass. Her fingers brushed his. His skin was hot. She took a sip. The liquid burned pleasantly down her throat, warming her chest. "Dante," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "What just happened? You destroyed them. Those men. They can ruin lives." Dante turned to look at her, his profile illuminated by the passing streetlights. "They can ruin normal lives, Elena. They cannot touch mine. And now that you are with me, they cannot touch yours." "I'm not with you," Elena said, a spark of her old defiance returning. "I haven't seen you in 15 years. You disappeared. You went to boarding school and never came back to the neighborhood." Dante let out a long, heavy sigh. He scrubbed a hand over his face, looking suddenly weary. "Is that what they told you? Boarding school?" "My father said you were sent away because you were getting into trouble. He said you forgot about us." Dante laughed, but it was a bitter, jagged sound. "Forgot? Elena, there hasn't been a single day in 15 years that I haven't thought about the girl with the flower on her nose who used to sneak me cannolis." He turned his body fully toward her, ignoring the seatbelt. His grey eyes bore into hers, intense and searching. "I wrote to you," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Every week for the first year. Then every month. I sent them to your house. I told you where I was, not school, Elena. I was sent to Sicily, to learn the family business in the mud and the blood. It was hell. The only thing that kept me sane was writing those letters to you." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Dante, I swear to you, I never received a single letter. Not one." Dante studied her face. He was a human lie detector. It was a skill required for his survival. He saw the confusion in her emerald eyes, the genuine hurt. She was telling the truth. "If you didn't get them," Dante said slowly, the gears in his mind turning with terrifying precision, "then someone intercepted them." "Who would do that?" Elena asked. "My father loved you. He always gave you free bread." "Your father was a good man," Dante agreed. "But he was also a frightened man. He knew who my father was. He knew what I was destined to become." Dante looked out the window at the blurred city. He probably thought he was saving you, keeping the baker's daughter away from the monster's son. Elena felt tears prick her eyes again. "He passed away 4 years ago. Heart attack." "I know," Dante said softly. "I sent flowers, unsigned, white lilies, his favorite." Elena gasped. "That was you? We thought it was the Grim Reaper or something. The card just said rest. I couldn't sign my name. By then I was already underboss. My name on a wreath would have brought police to your mother's door. Mentioning her mother brought Elena back to reality. The hospital, the bills, the crushing weight of her real life. "Dante, please," she said, putting the glass down. "You have to let me out. I have a shift at the diner tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. If I lose the job at l'Orologio, I need to pick up double shifts. My mother... She's at Mount Sinai. She has stage 4 kidney failure. The insurance capped out months ago." Dante's expression darkened. The relaxed posture vanished, replaced by tension. "Kidney failure," he repeated. "And you are paying for this alone?" "I have to. There's no one else." Dante looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. He saw the cheap fabric of her dress. He saw the calluses on her hands. He saw the sacrifice she was making, slowly killing herself to save her mother. "Enzo," Dante said to the driver. "Yes, Capo." "Call Dr. Aris Thorne at New York Presbyterian. Wake him up. Tell him I need him to take a transfer patient at Mount Sinai immediately. Private wing. Top specialists." "No!" Elena grabbed Dante's arm. You can't pay for this. I can't owe you that kind of money. I can't be bought, Dante. I'm not like those men at the club." Dante looked down at her hand on his arm. He covered it with his own. "You aren't being bought, Tesoro," he said gently. "And you don't owe me. Think of it as back payment for the cannolis. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I spent more than that on a racehorse last week that I've never even seen," Dante said, his voice flat. "Do not insult me by refusing. Your mother gets the best care. Tonight." He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. "It's done," he said, putting the phone away. "Now, stop fighting me. We are almost home." The car pulled into the underground garage of the Obsidian Tower, a 70-story needle of glass and steel overlooking Central Park. This was Dante's fortress. They took a private elevator that had no buttons, only a retinal scanner. When the doors opened, they stepped directly into the penthouse. It was breathtaking, and yet incredibly lonely. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. The furniture was Italian, modern, and low. Everything was black, grey, or chrome. There were no photos, no knickknacks, no signs of life. It was a museum of power. "Make yourself comfortable," Dante said, removing his suit jacket and tossing it carelessly onto a leather sofa worth more than Eleanor's childhood home. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing muscular forearms and the rest of the tattoo that snaked down his wrist. Elena walked to the window. The city looked like a circuit board from up here. "It's quiet," she said. "It's soundproofed," Dante replied, walking to a wet bar. "I like the quiet. The world below is too loud." He poured 2 glasses of water. He walked over and handed one to her. "You're hungry," he stated. It wasn't a question. "I'm okay," Elena lied. Her stomach growled loudly, betraying her. She hadn't eaten since lunch, which had been half a bagel. Dante smirked, a genuine, boyish expression that reminded her of the teenager she used to know. "You were always a terrible liar. Come. The kitchen is fully stocked, though I rarely use it." They went into the kitchen, a gleaming expanse of marble. Dante opened the massive refrigerator. It was filled with high-end ingredients: prosciutto, imported cheeses, figs, sparkling water. He began to assemble a plate. He didn't call a chef. He did it himself. Elena watched him slice the prosciutto with surgical precision. There was something incredibly intimate about watching the most feared man in New York make a sandwich. "Sit." He pointed to a bar stool. She sat. He placed the plate in front of her. "Eat." Elena took a bite of the prosciutto and fig. It was delicious. She ate, realizing how starving she actually was. Dante leaned against the counter, crossing his ankles, watching her eat with a look of intense satisfaction. "So," Elena said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. "The letters." Dante's face hardened slightly. "Yes, the letters. If my father did not give them to me, and if he's dead—" Elena trailed off. A horrible thought occurred to her. Where did they go? Did he throw them away? "Your father was a sentimental man," Dante said thoughtfully. "He kept every drawing you ever made. I remember them taped to the bakery wall. He wouldn't have thrown away letters from his friend's son. He would have hidden them." Dante pulled out his phone again. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Capo," a voice answered. It was Luca, his head of intelligence. "Luca," Dante said, "I need you to go to the Rossi Bakery in Little Italy. It's been sold. It's a coffee shop now. But the apartment upstairs, is it still occupied?" "No, boss. It's been vacant since Mrs. Rossi moved to the assisted living facility before the hospital." "Break in," Dante ordered calmly. "Check the floorboards in the master bedroom. Check the false back in the pantry. Find a box, a metal tin. It will be full of envelopes. Consider it done. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Dante hung up. Elena stared at him. "You're breaking into my old house?" "I'm retrieving my property," Dante corrected. "And yours." He walked around the island and stood in front of her. The distance between them was closing, the air becoming thick with the memories of what they once were and the reality of what they were now. "Why didn't you come find me?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. "When you came back to New York, why didn't you just come to the bakery?" Dante looked away, his jaw working. For the first time, he looked unsure. "Because I am not the boy who left," he whispered. "I have blood on my hands, Elena. Rivers of it. I have enemies who would use you to get to me. I told myself I was protecting you by staying away. I watched you from afar. I made sure your neighborhood was safe. I made sure no gangs bothered your street." He looked back at her, his eyes burning. "But tonight, when I saw those parasites disrespecting you, when I saw you on your knees—" Dante reached out. His hand cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed over her skin, rough against smooth. "I realized that my protection was useless if I wasn't standing beside you," he said. "I realized I would burn this whole city to the ground before I let anyone make you feel small again." Elena leaned into his touch. She couldn't help it. It was magnetic. "Dante, I'm not letting you go again, Elena," he murmured, leaning in close. His breath ghosted over her lips. "You can fight me. You can yell. But I am keeping you. I am paying your debts. I am destroying your enemies. You are mine. You have always been mine." It was a possessive, dark declaration. But to Elena, who had felt so alone, so burdened, and so invisible for so long, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a promise. Just as their lips were about to touch, a moment 15 years in the making, Dante's phone buzzed violently on the marble counter. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Dante pulled back with a growl of frustration. He grabbed the phone. It was Luca. "This better be good, Luca," Dante snapped. "Boss," Luca's voice was breathless. "I'm at the apartment. I found the box." "Good. Bring it to me." "Boss, You need to know something. The box isn't hidden in the floorboards. It was sitting on the kitchen table. And it's empty." Dante's eyes narrowed. "Empty?" "Yes, but there's a note inside. It's fresh. The ink is still wet." Dante felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "Read it." It says, "Did you really think you could buy her back, Dante? The past isn't cheap. If you want the letters and the girl, you'll have to pay the real debt. Come to the warehouse on Pier 4. Alone." Dante's hand gripped the phone so hard the screen cracked. "Who signed it?" Dante demanded. There was a pause on the line. "It's signed Marcus Vane." Elena watched the blood drain from Dante's face, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. The Vane brothers hadn't just run away. They had made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had dared to strike back. Dante looked at Elena. The softness was gone. The monster was back. "We have to go," he said, his voice like grinding stones. "What is it?" Elena asked, terrified by the shift in him. "The bill hasn't been paid in full yet," Dante said, grabbing his jacket. "And tonight I'm going to collect." The rain at Pier 4 was different than in the city. Here, mixed with the salty spray of the Hudson River, it felt heavier, colder. The warehouse loomed like a rotting tooth against the skyline, a relic of an industrial age that men like Marcus Vane usually only saw from the windows of their high-rise offices. Dante's Rolls-Royce glided to a stop 100 yards from the entrance. The headlights cut through the downpour, illuminating the rusted corrugated metal doors. "Stay here," Dante commanded, his hand reaching for the door handle. "No," Elena said. Her voice was shaking, but her chin was set. "He has my father's letters. He has our past. I'm not sitting in the car while you fight for my history." Dante looked at her. In the shadows of the car, his eyes gleamed with a mix of frustration and admiration. He saw the same fire in her that he had loved when they were children. "Stay behind me," he said. "If I move, you move. If I tell you to run, you don't look back." "I'm not running anymore, Dante." They stepped out into the storm. Dante moved with the predatory grace of a panther, his coat billowing in the wind. Elena stayed close to his back, shielding her face from the stinging rain. The warehouse door was unlocked. It creaked open with a groan of rusted metal. Inside, the space was cavernous, smelled of diesel and old fish. In the center of the room, illuminated by a single hanging construction light, stood Marcus Vane. He looked unhinged. His expensive suit was ruined, his tie undone. In one hand, he held a silver revolver that shook violently. In the other, he clutched a rusted metal tin, the kind Elena's father used to keep yeast receipts in. "I told you to come alone," Marcus screamed, his voice echoing off the high rafters. "You brought the girl. You broke the rules." "I make the rules," Dante said, his voice calm, carrying effortlessly across the distance. He walked forward, stepping into the circle of light. He positioned himself so that he was a human shield between the gun and Elena. "Stop!" Marcus shrieked, raising the gun. "I'll shoot! I swear to God, I'll shoot you!" "You won't," Dante said, taking another step. "Because you are a businessman, Marcus. You calculate risk. And you know that if you pull that trigger, my men outside will peel the skin from your bones before you hit the floor." Marcus's eyes darted to the shadows of the warehouse. He saw nothing, but the threat hung heavy in the air. He lowered the gun slightly, his resolve crumbling. "I have the letters," Marcus sneered, holding up the tin. "I read them." Pathetic. I miss the smell of the bakery. The stars in Sicily are lonely. You're soft, Moretti. You're just a sentimental thug. Put the box down, Marcus. No! Marcus pulled a gold lighter from his pocket. He flicked it. A tall flame sprang up. I want my money back. I want the 100 grand. I want a public apology, or I burn these memories to ash right now. Elena gasped. No! Dante stopped. He stared at the flame, then at Marcus. A small, terrifying smile touched his lips. Do it, Dante said. Elena grabbed Dante's arm. Dante, what are you doing? Burn them, Dante challenged Marcus. Go ahead, burn the paper. Marcus looked confused. He expected begging. He expected desperation. I'll do it. Paper is just paper, Dante said, taking another step, closing the distance to 10 feet. Ink fades. Paper rots. You think you can hold my past hostage? You think those letters are what binds me to her? Dante reached behind him, grabbed Elena's hand, and pulled her to his side, interlacing his fingers with hers. She is right here, Dante said, his voice dropping to a worshipful growl. I don't need the letters to remember who I love. I don't need the past. I have the future. Marcus's hand wavered. The flame flickered. He realized with dawning horror that he had no leverage. He was just a spoiled child holding a match, standing in front of a dragon. You're a monster, Marcus whispered. Yes, Dante agreed. And you are trespassing. Dante moved. It was a blur. He didn't go for the gun. He went for the hand holding the lighter. He twisted Marcus's wrist. There was a sickening snap. Marcus screamed, dropping the lighter and the tin. The gun clattered to the floor. Dante kicked the gun away. He caught the tin box before it hit the ground. Marcus fell to his knees, cradling his broken wrist, sobbing. Please, please, I'll pay. I'll give you anything. Dante handed the tin box to Elena. She clutched it to her chest, tears streaming down her face. It smelled of her father's bakery. Open it, Dante said to her gently. Elena pried the lid open. Inside, stacked neatly, were dozens of envelopes, some yellowed with age, some fresh, all addressed to Elena Rossi. She looked up at Dante, her heart overflowing. You kept writing, even when I didn't answer. I would have written until the day I died, Dante said. He turned back to Marcus, who was cowering on the concrete. Dante signaled to the shadows. From the darkness, 4 of Dante's soldiers emerged. They didn't look like the bodyguards at the club. These men looked like executioners. Take him, Dante said dismissively. He likes the water. Let him see how cold the river is tonight. Dante, no! Marcus screamed as he was dragged away into the dark. My father will... The heavy warehouse doors slammed shut, cutting off the scream. Silence returned to the warehouse, save for the drumming of rain on the roof. Dante turned to Elena. The violence drained from his posture, leaving only the man who had loved her for a lifetime. I'm sorry it took me 15 years, he whispered, wiping a raindrop from her cheek. You're here now, Elena said, dropping the box to the floor and wrapping her arms around his neck. You're finally here. I'm never leaving again, Dante vowed. The debt is paid. The past is buried. You are the only thing that matters. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of rain, danger, and a love that had survived silence, distance, and time. In the cold, dark warehouse, Elena finally felt warm. She was no longer the waitress who cleaned up messes. She was the queen of the city, standing in the arms of her king. And just like that, the balance of power shifted forever. Elena didn't just get her revenge. She got her history back, and a future she never dared to dream of. It's a reminder that true power isn't about the money you have in the bank or the suit you wear. It's about loyalty, resilience, and the willingness to burn the world down for the ones you love. The Vane brothers learned the hard way that you can buy silence, but you can never buy respect. I hope you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and the heavy price of arrogance. If you felt that satisfaction when Dante finally put those billionaires in their place, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And tell me in the comments, if you were Dante, would you have let Marcus Vane go, or did he get exactly what he deserved? I read every comment, and I'd love to hear your take. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We have a new drama coming next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.